And it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. This is Nate from KordKutters and also Kodi. Look at this shirt that some of the team members got. We're pretty pumped about it. Today, we are here to talk about Kodi 15 Isengard. And actually, we were going to talk about that last week, but we were so rudely interrupted by the Silicon Dust guys wanting to chat with us about their cool DVR that, man, I guess we had to talk about that instead. But no, seriously, it was a really cool chat, and there was some crazy information in there. So you should maybe later I'll put a link right here, and you should check that out. Or maybe I won't. I don't know. I'm pretty lazy about these things. Anyway, so that was the HD home run. That was last week. This week, let's finally talk about Kodi 15 Isengard. For those of you who, I guess, are under a rock or something, last week, July 21st, we announced the release for Kodi 15, which is a pretty major release for us because it also marked the introduction of Kodi to the Android Google Play Store, which is pretty exciting. We're now past 500,000 active users. I think we're rapidly approaching 600,000 if we haven't already hit that mark. And it's absurd how quickly that got picked up in the Google Play Store. We're pretty pumped about it, let me tell you what. So that's Kodi and Google Play, which is cool, but it's not necessarily features that a lot of people outside of Android users are going to get to look at. So I thought this week we'd take a nice in-depth look at some of the features that everyone's going to get to play with, regardless of, whether they're Android users or Windows users or whatever. These are all the really cool generic and Kodi features that everyone can see. So with that said, let me go ahead and share my Kodi screen. All right. I'm going to click present to everyone. I'm never really sure if present to everyone actually accomplishes anything, but, better safe than sorry. So here is Kodi 15. If you aren't sure if you have Kodi 15, the easy way to tell is to go to System and then System Info. And I think my mouse shows. If it says Kodi 15.0, that means you've got it. Compiled July 21st, 2015. There is... For some of you who are running on iOS devices, we were having some problems lately with our mirror servers. So if you aren't getting the update, we apologize, and we'll try to. If we haven't already fixed that, we'll try to fix it as soon as possible. Everyone else, though, should have no problem getting this, and especially those of you who are using Google Play, because those aren't even using our servers anymore. So here is Kodi 15. My plan is to just kind of go through all of those features that were listed in the forum, then to go through the FAQ and check out a couple things there, and then to talk about some of the things that aren't working very well right now. So to start out, I figure we can just go straight from the forum, which means, from the blog post. So what I'm going to start out doing is showing you something called chapter select menus. Chapter select menus are, you've probably seen them almost everywhere. The whole idea is that, you've probably seen them in just about every DVD you've ever used, and every Blu-ray. A chapter is just a section of the movie that you want to see. These are automatically created, and what that means is we go to the beginning of each chapter, which is marked out in an MKV file, and we take a picture of the first frame from that chapter, and then we create a whole thing. So we'll go ahead and pause this. So this is Ruby. The reason I'm using this one is because I ripped this one personally, and I'm a big fan of this series. So what I did was I actually went ahead and created my own chapters, just so we could get the best possible view of them. So if you go over here to this little note paper looking thing right here, and that may change from skin to skin. This is just in Confluence. And you click it, you'll see here are the chapter listings. Normally, in the past, before Kodi 15, this would only include bookmarks that you yourself had created. We've now introduced the ability to have bookmarks that are also chapters, which is what you're seeing. So here they are. So here's like chapter 1.5. And you'll note that these chapters don't necessarily need to be named in any particular numbering order. I could have done chapter 3 to 17, whatever. It's just whatever you choose to name it. And if they come pre-named, then, you know, all the better. But the chapters work out like this, and my personal recommendation, especially for all of you who are doing your own ripping, it really is valuable anymore to actually name and put together your chapters as you're doing the ripping, because it really adds to everything. It makes everything look an awful lot better. But those are chapters, and they're inside bookmarks, which can be found right here. In the future, I personally think it would be pretty cool if we could get the chapters from the info screen, which is, let's see, episode information, which is right here. It'd be nice if there was a button for chapters right here, but that doesn't exist at the moment. So, you know, what can you do? We'll see what happens in the future. There is stuff that shows like cast members and everything like that, but that's been there forever. There's nothing really especially special about that. So that is chapters. Next, let's look into adaptive seeking. And to do that, because it's easiest to do it this way, we'll go to Big Buck Bunny, good old standard Big Buck Bunny, which always looks nice. And you may have seen the video of this, but we'll show it to you anyway. The whole idea is with adaptive seeking, you should be able to press once and it seeks for 10 seconds. If you press twice, it seeks for 30 seconds. If you press 3 times, it's a minute. 4 times, it's 3 minutes, and so on. And you can do the same thing backwards. So 5 times is 5 minutes. And it works both ways. Super, super simple, super clear. Some people are worried that this will be a little less than obvious to family members, and that may be true. In my experience, though, the 30-second thing made sense, but I kind of feel like this makes even more sense. Like, it just sort of, once you're used to it, it just kind of feels right. You know, that's just my opinion. Maybe it'll turn out I'm wrong, but that's my impression. Next thing on the list, and we'll actually go back to Ruby because it's a pretty handy thing since I did the ripping myself and it looks really nice. Oh, there it is. Yeah, we'll resume, pause. The other thing that's really nice about Ruby is that you can, we've now added lists for audio and subtitles. In the past, you had to use a spinner. See, you had to like spin between these things. These days, you can pick from all of the whole list of audio streams or subtitle streams that you might have available. So, you know, you can have the original soundtrack, or you can have any one of the, in the case of Ruby, any one of the 4 director's commentaries. This actually is the director commentary, the actress commentary, the animators, and the artists. And there are a lot of movies like that where there are multiple commentaries. You can pick any one. The same thing works for subtitles, except this one doesn't come with any subtitles. But it would look basically the same. You get to pick from a list of subtitles rather than having to go through a spinner and trying to find them. This is especially handy for people using side-by-side 3D, because side-by-side 3D, it might be a bug, actually, because it's not really addressed. There's an issue where if you watch side-by-side 3D in 2D, and you've got the 3D subtitles selected, then they may not turn off. And so the only way to turn them off is to switch it to 2D subtitles, and then they'll turn off. So that's just a little tip for everybody out there. It's not necessarily an Isengard thing. Let's see. Add-on language and expanded international preferences. This might be one of my most favorite things of all. That could just mean that I'm sort of ridiculous, though. Let's see. Okay, we have our location set up correctly. Let's go to appearances. One of the really cool things about Isengard is the fact that you can let's see, show weather information. There we go. You can change all kinds of things about localization. So here we have some information about, there's my mouse, about the weather where I am in Wichita, Kansas. It's partly cloudy, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. But you can control almost every aspect of how Isengard shows the weather under this international tab. So I have my my language set to English US, and I recommend for all of you United States users out there, you really should keep it at English US instead of just English, unless you really love reading favorite spelled in a funny English way or a British way. Sticking to English US is it's pretty nice, especially if you have relatives who get confused easily. But that's not why we're here. We're here to look at all of this other stuff down here. We've separated out almost everything from the language. So now you have almost total control over everything that you see here. So let's say, for example, we decide to go with a 24-hour clock. And let's say we decide to switch it over to a weird European style. Oh, let's do an international setting. So where it's set like this. And then the temperature units, yeah, sure, let's do Celsius. And for the wind speed, you know what? I feel like miles per hour is too clear. So why don't we do furlongs per fortnight? That's right, furlongs per fortnight. I don't know exactly who in the dev team decided to include this speed unit, but it's probably the most hilarious speed unit I've ever seen. So we go back to the home screen here. And now we know it's 29 degrees Celsius or centigrade, depending on who you are. I think those are the same thing. I actually don't have any idea if there's a difference. If you know if there's a difference, feel free to say so in the comments and educate me. But it's 25 degrees Celsius out. And let's check the weather for wind. Ah, yes, wind is coming from the east-southeast at 15,032 furlongs per fortnight. So sorry. Okay. So what is that in some kind of reasonable thing? Because I'm curious. Weather, that means 5 miles per hour. So that's furlong per fortnight is maybe it's basically like pirate language in terms of usefulness, but it's funny enough that I like it a lot. So yeah, so you might switch it over to that. So that's okay. So one other cool thing that you can do. So you have all this control over international settings, which is really neat. The other really cool thing is in languages, you don't just have to stick to. Let me start again. In languages, one of the really nifty things you can do these days is, as we go around updating add-ons and everything else, we have specific translators who go around translating all of the languages into your local language. Like someone out there, I'm not sure who, otherwise I'd call them out, can actually translates our original English UK language into Czech and Croatian and Dutch and everything else. And they do incredible work. The problem is, up until Kodi 15, we've been kind of handicapped because we haven't been able to update those languages inside of Kodi until we release a new version. And so one of the things we would do with like 14.2 is we'd bump all of the translations. And so in between point releases and releases, people would just have no new translations or fixed translations, or if a translation was only 50% done, then there would be no way to add any more. So now we've add-onified translations so that you can update a translation at any time, and it should just work. So right now, the only translations I have installed are English and English US. So let's install English Australian. There it is. It's installed now. And now we have a whole new set of languages. There we go. And everything's set regionally for Australian. So now it's 24 hours, and here's the interesting Australian version of setting the calendar, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to switch it back to English US now. And it looks like, oh no, I think because I said that earlier. Well, anyway, if you don't manually change all the regionalization stuff, it'll update itself for you. We'll reset it to default. There we go. And that's actually, it's possible a lot of people don't realize that exists. There's a reset to above settings to default option across all Kodi settings. So see here in skin, you can do the same thing. And that we switched over to that either in Kodi 14 or Kodi 13 maybe. The idea being, back in the day, if you switched your settings around, there would be no way to switch them back to factory, you know, the settings you got when you installed Kodi for the first time. Because Kodi's settings were, or at that time I guess it was XBMC. XBMC settings were directly tied to the GUI itself. There was no underlying information about the settings. And so if you changed them, then the only way to change them back to the default settings was to completely uninstall Kodi altogether, or delete the user data anyway. So today we've kind of decoupled the GUI from the settings, which means we can do cool things like reset the above settings to default, which is super handy if you don't want to have to go back through and change Celsius to Fahrenheit and short date to whatever regional date is appropriate for your time, if you're just messing around with things. Or if you find yourself accidentally in furlongs per fortnight and you don't remember how to get back, you just reset above settings to default. And that exists everywhere. So let's say you're in acceleration, and Windows is pretty easy, but there, you know, in Android there are all kinds of weird acceleration options. You can just reset above settings to default, and then it gets you back. That's not a Kodi. That's not an Isengard specific feature, but I bet a lot of people didn't know about it, so I figure I may as well show it to you guys. So that was language add-ons and expanded international preferences. Next we have the improved add-on manager. So I don't necessarily, in most cases, recommend that you visit the add-on manager if you can help it. If you want video add-ons, for example, you should just go to add-ons, get more, and then pick from the video add-ons this way. But you can visit the actual add-on manager by going to System, Add-ons. And then it just goes back to where it was. So, okay, so install from repo. I've got some testing repos in there. We've reconfigured the way the Kodi add-on repository shows things off just a little bit, just to make it easier for people to understand exactly where everything is. We've added a search feature. We've added system, which means these are all dependencies that you should absolutely not touch. These are things that you're never actually going to mess with. They're just add-ons that help a bunch of different add-ons do things. And here's some orphan dependencies. These are add-ons that used to help do things but don't anymore. I definitely recommend not touching these. Even though they're orphan, that doesn't mean they're not going to be useful in the near future. So definitely keep those around. They're only, I mean, each of these add-ons is only like a couple kilobytes. It's just text, so it's not taking up a bunch of room. Okay, so my add-ons, and then the list here is pretty extensive. I highly recommend, if you have an option, there aren't a ton of things. Actually, it's possible, let's see, check for updates. It's possible that at the moment the repository isn't showing everything. Yeah, it's not showing everything because of that same issue we were having with the mirrors that was making it so that people in iOS couldn't update to Kodi 15. But in the future, those add-on in the next few days, or maybe in the next few hours even, I don't know. You can go through here and go into these areas and get all kinds of information, cool add-ons and everything. So that's add-on improvements, and the rest of the improvements here. Let's switch out of Kodi for a second. The rest of the improvements can be found in the blog post, which, if you haven't read it yet, it's a pretty cool read, because I wrote it because I'm so great, obviously. It's a pretty good read. A lot of the changes are we no longer support all these various things, or Android requires change the volume instead of Kodi. There was an FFmpeg update. Closed captioning support in live TV is improved in America. It might be elsewhere too, but definitely in America. It's a big, extensive list, and this list isn't even close to the whole list. There's an awful lot going on with Kodi 15, which you can read about in all of the RCs and beta blogs and everything like that. But it's a pretty extensive list these days. With the next upcoming release, Kodi 16, we expect to have a whole bunch of other cool updates, which I've talked about in other places. The biggest one, especially for Windows users, is the update to DirectX 11. From a user perspective, that actually won't be super visible. It'll just make it so that a lot of things that were breaking don't break anymore. It might make video decoding a little bit better too. DirectX 11 uses a new form of video decoding, which is called, I'm definitely going to get it wrong, D3D 90. No, that's definitely wrong. Never mind. It uses a new form of video decoding that's essentially DXVA. Like it works the same way and it looks the same way. It just has a new name. So we still call it DXVA because honestly, there's no difference from a user perspective. But all the things do include little improvements that fix various bugs from the past and make it so that whenever we make a change, it doesn't break the whole system. So we're pretty pleased with it, is basically the point I'm getting with. There are more features coming up with Kodi 16, but I figure we'll probably leave those for another day. So with that said, let's get into a few of the issues that we have with Kodi 15. One of the dirty secrets in software development is that there's no such thing as an actual final release. And that may freak some people out, but it's the reality. When you have 15 developers and then like 15 more QA people working on something, you get as many bugs as you can, but every person already familiar with software always goes to those parts of the software that they're familiar with. Really good QA testers are better about getting out of that mold and going into all kinds of places. But the best people to find things wrong with your software are people who aren't familiar with it or who use it in weird ways. So that's why we have the release pattern that we do. We start with alphas, and those are usually people who are already pretty familiar with the software, and so they tend not to go outside of their areas. They find some things, but never everything. Then we get into betas, and that expands the number of people using the software. And then we get into release candidates, which again expands the number of people using the software, but never to the extent that we know exactly how many people or exactly what issues exist out there that are really affecting people. Beyond a select few that are real clear problems, like hanging in Mac on Mac PCs, or if you play a video on YouTube in Windows, then the entire system crashes. Things like that. Things that are very clearly definite problems and easily reproduced by everybody, not just people with select pieces of hardware. When we do a final release, and I hate to say it, but this is sort of the reality. To some extent, that's like the beta of the final release, because what happens is we go from having, 100,000 users or 500,000 users using it to 5 million users using it, and the number it's a factor of 10 or 100 or some crazy amount. So the bug reports that we didn't even see beforehand suddenly become enormous, because what used to be one or two people saying this might be a problem that I sometimes run into turns into 100 or 500 people saying this is definitely a problem that I'm running into. One of the most obvious examples of that, and I feel embarrassed because I have a Windows PC and I have an Xbox 360 controller connected to it. But one of the most obvious examples of that we totally missed and people pointed out was that if you press up or down on the controller of an Xbox 360 on the right joystick. If you press up, the volume is supposed to go up, and if you press down, it's supposed to go down. But if you do either one with Kodi 15, the volume always goes down. And if you press left or right, the volume always goes up. So it's an interesting problem that we ran into that we just didn't, I don't know, we just didn't see. The other problem that we ran into is, and this is, it kind of shows the gap between how most users use Kodi and how most developers use Kodi. As I was showing you earlier, one of the things that we're really pumped about is the skip stepping, which is, skip forward 15, 30, 1 minute, 3 minutes, whatever. We're pretty pleased about that, and we're excited about it, and we think it's really cool. And the reason for that is because we all skip forward. We don't fast forward and rewind. A lot of users don't work that way. A lot of users love rewinding and love fast forwarding, and that's just how they use Kodi. And so a few users pointed out that rewinding seemed to be not working very well in Windows, Kodi for Windows, and maybe other places too. I'm not really sure, but I know that the issue was initially pointed out in Kodi for Windows, and frankly, we just didn't catch it. Like they were there, but we didn't realize how there they were, if that makes sense. And so when that happened, we released Kodi 15, and suddenly we discovered that not only was this an issue, it was like a really big issue. And so we it was one of the first really big, oh my gosh, we have to fix this quickly. And that happens with almost every release. There's always at least one issue where it's just such a big problem for such a lot of people that never showed up while we were going through beta testing or release candidates that I don't know. I mean, it almost always shows up, but we didn't catch it, and we don't catch it, and that's just it's just the nature of software development. So that brings me to my next point. If you are using one of our social media networks, we've shared this Isengard 15.1 testing thread, which let me pull that up. So this is, you can find it in, let's see, you can find it in the forum, support, general support, OS independent, Kodi pre 15.1 Isengard testing. This is the list, and here it is down here, the list of changes we made from 15.0 to 15.1 that are critical for all of you users out there who have very specific needs that we managed to miss. In particular, we've already got a fix in, let's see, various fast forward and rewinding improvements. We've got fixes in for a lot of those issues that we somehow missed along the way. Add installed languages to the list of possible stream languages. I don't know. It's a list that, like I said, in a lot of ways is edge cases, but they're edge cases that are important to you, and so we needed to fix them. So I'll put a link to that forum thread in the description below once we're done with this. And otherwise, you can just go to the forum and follow that list, set of links I showed you a second ago. But yeah, it's just the nature of software. If you absolutely need the most stable version, frankly, and this is not going to apply to most people because most people aren't these edge cases, frankly. But if you are one of the edge case people who has kind of an unusual way of using Kodi, then it's a little bit recommended that you wait for 15.1. And everyone sort of knows that. Nobody buys the first iPhone or the first iWatch unless they have a lot of money to blow. They wait for the second version. And nobody, unless they're me or people like me, nobody installs Windows 10 the day of. They wait a couple weeks until the patch comes out, the inevitable patch, because when you increase the number of people using software by a factor of 10 or 100, you're going to find those edge cases. So yeah, so that's 15.1 coming up, the edge case fixer. Fast forwarding and rewinding is fixed. And I should note, remember, these are edge cases. Fast forwarding and rewinding are fixed, but that just means that they were broken in some areas, and it doesn't have anything to do with skipping forward and backward. So if you've been using Kodi skipping forward and skipping backward, you're never going to run into those issues. But yeah, so that's Kodi 15.1. And I think, let's see, was there anything else I wanted to talk about? I did want to get into the FAQ, but I don't know if there's necessarily very much to talk about. I guess the one major issue is hardware support. And the hardware support goes like this, or platform support might be a better word. With Kodi 15, we've cut off a lot of the older platforms. With Kodi 14, we already cut off Windows XP. With 15, we're now cutting off some of the other areas. Now, Android 4.2 is required if you're running on Android. I had a conversation with somebody on Reddit recently about the Tegra 2, and if at any point you guys want a nice history lesson on the history of Kodi for Android, feel free to say so, because I find that entire subject to be fascinating. But it was fun to delve back into the early history of Kodi for Android and really, frankly, XBMC for embedded devices, because one of the most interesting stories about early hardware adoption for XBMC isn't actually about XBMC at all. It's the story of how Boxy decided to go with an Intel processor instead of an ARM processor for the Boxy box. And it's I don't know. I'm kind of a geek about these things, and I find that story to be really fascinating. So if you want to hear about that, feel free also to say so in the comments below, and maybe next week we'll talk about it, or one of these weeks. So Android 4.2 is the minimum. iOS 5.1.1 is required. Mac OS 10 10.7 is the minimum there, and I think that's actually, it's pretty close to having been the minimum for a while. Ubuntu 14.04 LTS or 15.04 is the minimum for Linux, and for Ubuntu, the PPA there and all the Ubuntu derivatives. We've completely stopped supporting the Apple TV 2 at this point. I don't know if there are people out there who are still supporting it, because it is possible to still build with it. It's just a real pain in the butt. And I think, and I don't quote me on this, but I think Sam with Crystal Ubuntu, which might also have been named OSMC, he might still actually be supporting the Apple TV 1, which to some greater or lesser extent has always actually been the better hardware. It's because it has a chip from some company that actually allows decoding of more graphics intensive videos. And finally, the Ouya, which was sort of one of the first really big Android device set-top boxes out there. It does, the hardware on it, which is a Tegra 3, does actually still work with Kodi, and it works great. You just need to upgrade the OS. And if you just visit the FAQ for Isengard, which once again, post down there, you can get how to install CyanogenMod on Ouya, and that'll get you pretty much all you need for all that. So that's real simple. I guess a few other notes. Everything we've heard is that upgrading from 14 to 15 doesn't break your MySQL installs, which is shocking to us. It almost always breaks in the past, so we don't know how we managed to get around that issue. And upgrading from 14 to 15, as always, is simple. You just install it again. On Android these days, if you're using Google Play, you don't even have to do that. It'll do itself for you. And it'll do the same thing on all the Linux versions out there. You just install right over the top, and it should just work. What's really interesting is because I was testing something out for Kodi 16, the upcoming version, I actually, for this video, reinstalled 15 over 16, and it also just worked, which was pretty cool. I was pretty pleased with that. So yeah, installing right on top of it should just do the job. And I think that does it. I guess let me double check and see if there are any comments, and if there aren't, then we'll get going. Oh, here we go. There are a few. I do want to hear the history and experience with Boxy. I still have a Boxy box. Okay, Jay Robertson. That'll be next week. I wrote a blog post about it. Maybe I'll include that in the comments below too. It's the Boxy box history, and the history of Boxy altogether, I think, is really an interesting story, just because it was interesting to watch an entire company kind of rise up from nowhere and then vanish into the night again, based on XBMC software. And what is your shirt will be available for sale? Sadly, no. This is team member shirt right here. These ones we're not going to have for sale. These ones are a little bit, if you've ever been really irritated because we don't have a feature and you posted in the forum and we said code welcome, these are the shirts why you should actually try to learn how to code or help convince somebody else to do it, or help in the forums or whatever. One of the coolest things about Kodi is that it's all volunteer supported, which means that you don't have to go through a hiring process to become a team member. All you have to do is contribute in some way or another, become a god of Wiki, or become the ultimate forum moderator and help figure things out for people, or whatever. Do something enough so that we start noticing you, and eventually, if you kind of keep at it and are pretty good and friendly and nice to forum users, if you're working on support side, or if you're just a genius on the dev side, then eventually we'll probably see about adding you as a Kodi team member, and then you get cool shirts like this right here, Kodi team member. So that's a little incentive for that. Also, this is, if you're an amazing artist, that might also get you in there, just because we're always needing artists, and we're really also always needing QA people. Remember what I just talked about. A lot of times we miss things. Part of the reason for that is the people doing the QA a lot of times are just the people who did the development in the first place, and so they don't know how to find the issues that they found. It's the same reason why when you write a paper for school or something, you need somebody else to edit it to really catch all of your mistakes. It's exactly the same concept. You wrote the mistakes, and in your head they sound right, so you need somebody else to find and fix them. So if you're great at QA, you can potentially get one of these shirts for free, and that's the only way to get one. So I think that's all the questions we have for this week. Let me double check. I do want to check, because a couple weeks now in a row, I feel like I've missed questions from previous weeks, and I feel bad about that. So let me go back a little bit and double check on questions from previous weeks. Last week we talked about HD Home Run, and actually what was really cool about that was Ted, or Theodore Head from Silicon Dust, the CEO. After we finished the conversation, he actually went in and helped answer questions in the section underneath the YouTube channel, underneath the video, and it was really, man, those guys are really cool. It's not very often that you see the CEO of a company going in and actually answering questions. I feel like the only times I've ever seen that, there might be 3 situations I can think of. The Silicon Dust, Ted, the Oculus Rift founder, whose name I'm suddenly blanking on. He does it all the time. And good old Lord Gaben, who's more involved in support for Steam and Valve than any actual paid Steam Valve's employees. It's ridiculous. So So yeah, good on Theodore Head for going in there and being a cool guy. And I think that'll do it for us. Let's. There's one other area where I want to check for questions, and I'd be surprised if they'll be there. We always post every week on KordKutters in Facebook and in there it is, and in the Kodi Facebook page when we're going live. And usually there aren't questions there, and there aren't this week either. So all right, so that's Kodi Isengard, Kodi 15. Next week, I guess maybe we'll do a little bit of a history chat about Boxy and the Boxy box. Maybe we'll probably talk about other things too, but I get really geeked out about that stuff. So hopefully you find that stuff interesting too, and we'll talk about it. I guess for now, for the rest of the week, in the questions below, in the comments below, feel free to write questions or comments or whatever you like. I guess other YouTube people say like and subscribe, so I guess like and subscribe. We actually just passed 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which means that I don't know. I hear really great things happen when you pass 1,000. Like we get, all the money or something. It hasn't happened yet, so maybe we don't do that. I don't know. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching, and see you later.